Back to our discussion. So as I said before, for people attending, we take a couple of weeks to bottom out on which particular competition, and people, the Monday Kaggle NLP team has already made the choice, but that's definitely one of the factors. But I would like to get input from people in this call as to which of the various competitions they would like to participate in and why. And as I mentioned before, I would encourage people to go read it, but I'll spend 2 minutes and take any other questions and comments before we start looking at it. Please do send in your suggestions. Just to kick off the thing I posted, kick off the idea of exploring different competitions. I posted some, and we'll go through and look at those in a minute. But do send it in, because we'll take a week or two to bottom out. And as Steve mentioned before, the reason for that is typically we run into problems either in the amount of time that people, evaluations of competitions take, or sometimes it's a data related challenge, meaning that data is no longer current or some changes have been made in the data since the competition closed. Those kinds of problems we run into, and therefore we have occasionally changed our first choice and gone to a different choice of competition. And as we discussed at the beginning of the call, we typically participate in things which have ended because of the rules of Kaggle. Any questions on, and as I mentioned also, the other thing is once we select, we tend to do work independently. By that I mean each of us tries our own ideas of what to do in the competition. Of course, with there are lots of starter notebooks and exploratory data analysis notebooks and other stuff that's or kernels that are available on Kaggle, and people try that on their own and come and discuss on a weekly basis, or even on the Slack channel, any issues they face. My point being that we typically stay away from immediately looking at the best solutions and what the best scores or scorers have done. And the initial weeks, we want to kind of put in our own efforts. And unlike many of the groups, what is challenging in this group is the fact that the more work you actually tend to do offline and try to submit and struggle with the various issues, the more benefit you have. It's not typically just somebody presenting, although later stages, we tend to look at what the best scorers have done. So we wait until many people have submitted, until we have kind of run out of ideas of how better to improve, and then we begin to look at what the top scorers in the competition have done, or what the state-of-the-art techniques are, and discuss those before we start the cycle all over again. So that's kind of, it's a good place to be right now for all of you who have joined, because you can weigh in on which of the competitions you'd like to do and why, and then go through a complete cycle. Any questions on the process? Okay, if not, let me see whether I can share my screen on just the 4 or 5 competitions that I've thrown out there. I have no strong preferences one way or the other. And as I mentioned before, the Monday meeting has already chosen one of them. So that can be one of our guiding factors as well on what to pick. But we can go through and look at what the interests of the people are and why and what they would like to learn from doing this competition. So with that said, let me share my screen on the... Are you seeing my screen of TensorFlow 2.0 question answering?
I can only see a black screen.
Ah. Okay. Let me see why that is.
I can see it now, yep.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. So let's, this is just bookmarked. I've just bookmarked the 4 or 5, and let's spend a few minutes just looking at them and if people have more to add than what I have to say, by all means, jump in. There's supposed to be a discussion. So this competition, I believe, and Gautam, correct me if I'm wrong, is the one that the Monday meeting has chosen. Is that right?
No, that's a tweet sentiment span extraction. It's a different one.
Oh, it's a different one. Okay. So that's something else that maybe if you can post the link to in the chat, then I'll also bring that up.
Sure.
Because I thought this was the one, but it could be mistaken. Okay, so this is one I saw from prior experience. I think one of the things we wanted to make sure is data is reasonable. In this case, it seems that shouldn't be a problem. It's megabytes. Then the other thing which we've looked at is, it ended fairly recently, so I don't think that should be a problem. Then from a evaluation standpoint, it's again, all you need to do is, I think, create a submission file and submit it. It's not, what I can tell, unless I'm missing something, it's not a kernel competition. I guess you don't need to submit the code, but just submit the results. Is that what it looks like, Steve? So that one is one. Here, I believe it is more of similarity of sentiment and using, again, from image, people may be familiar with it, but this using Jacquard score, similarity between extracted strings, I guess, in this case, as opposed to similarity between pieces of images.
Srinivas, are you showing something? I'm not seeing your screen.
Oh, really? Okay. I thought I was sharing my screen. Let me try again. Maybe there was some issue with my screen. It does say, can you see?
There, now I see it.
Okay, maybe it lost it for some reason. Okay, sorry about that. So I was just talking about this tweet sentiment extraction competition, and Gautam clarified that this is not the competition. Apparently, that I thought this was the one that they.
Yeah, this is the one. Actually,
That
I
is
was
the
saying
one.
the TensorFlow one earlier on your screen.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
Yeah,
So this is the one. Okay, that's what I thought. So this is the one that the Monday folks have chosen as well. So as I said, the data seems to be very reasonable, no issues there. Also, I believe it's not a kernel, meaning by that, you submit the results. So if I go to evaluation, sorry, that's data description. Where is the example of the data submission? Is it in the evaluation? Yeah, so here is an example of a submission file. So you just submit the text ID, the selected text, which shows the sentiment. And so from those standpoint, and in Gautam, where have you folks submitted and gotten results to where there isn't an issue with that, with this competition?
I think Yuri tried. Maybe he can speak on that.
Yuri, were you able to submit and get score fairly quickly?
Yeah. So what I did is I just submitted the whole span, which I think Gautam noticed that's actually the answer for neutral questions, because they couldn't determine what actually, there's no sentiment. So that was again 97% of the time that was the right answer.
I see.
Yeah. So it was really easy to submit.
Okay, so you could submit and it got the score back, because one of the problems we had in a different competition, as I said, was submission to getting score back on some of them if they've ended is sometimes a problem. So in the interest of time, this is definitely ought to be high on our list of choices. Let's kind of keep going, because there are a couple of other ones which I thought were interesting, primarily because on Stanford oriented, we have done the Q&A. So those are a couple of other ones that I bookmarked. This is, can you see my screen?
I'm still seeing the
Hello?
tweet sentiment one.
It's just slow to change, or is that, are you seeing Google Quest?
Yeah, I see it
Yeah,
now, yeah.
labeling?
now we see it.
Okay. So it's, I guess, for some reason, slow to shift over. This is one that ended about 7 months back. And this one, it's answering questions with single verifiable answers. But and they talk about, number of computable dimensions, human dimensions, but it's subjective question answering. What I didn't quickly gather from here is whether it's similar to the squad-like competition where you just predict from a paragraph the starting and the ending sections, or this is more complicated than that. From a data perspective, I think this is much bigger. It's like gigabytes, if I'm not mistaken. Link is very slow for some reason. Let's see, from evaluation. So here you say for each ID of question, you have to kind of predict the probability for each of the target variables, being if the question asked how well is the intent of the question understood, is the answer well written, so on and so forth. So this one seems a little more complicated, and even probably more complicated than the squad version of question answering. Let's see whether it gives me the data this time. No, still having problem loading. Okay. Can you folks see the TensorFlow 2.0 question answering, or no?
Nope. Still on the Google Quest.
Okay, just is taking a while to switch over for some reason.
I can see the tab for it at the top of your screen.
Oh, but you're not seeing the actual page, huh?
No, not yet.
That's weird. Okay, let me try stop sharing and start sharing again.
Oh no, it was there.
I just clicked away from it for a minute. Sorry about that. Do you see it now or not yet?
Not yet. At the minute, it's just black.
Is having issues with sharing screen today.
Yes, no.
You can see it? Okay, good. So this one seems a little more challenging, because even more than the other one. So open domain question answering. The open domain part is, I guess, the challenging part, because this is not restricted to the paragraph. Maybe the Google one, the Google Quest Q&A is probably limited to specific paragraphs from, say, wiki or provided data. In this case, I think it's private test data set, as you can see. Data for this one, oh, is 16 gig. So this is the large data one. So some of these, like this 16 gig one, it's easy to by the way, it's easy to compete on Kaggle itself. But as Steve mentioned earlier, there is a time limit on how much GPU cycles you can use. I believe it used to be 18. Now is it 36 hours?
It was 30, wasn't it? It's up to 40 now.
Oh, okay. So it's about 40 hours a week. And for image competitions, you know, running a few epochs and running 2 or 3 trials picks up pretty much. If, you know, each trial is about 8-9 hours sometimes, and it picks up the entire thing. The data size is not a problem if you're on Kaggle because you just attach the input, and that's not an issue. But if you're trying to participate by using some other cloud provider like using Google Drive and Colab, then you need to expand and go to the Google Pro and pay for some extra storage on Google Drive. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. If most people who are on the call do not have a problem with that, then going to larger data sizes isn't an issue. And as I said, the other way is just sticking to Kaggle and making submissions in Kaggle itself. That way you don't have to download the data, you just do it. The only bad thing about it historically is we have found that Kaggle UI isn't the most friendly one, and sometimes the restrictions on the hours of competition, as Steve can vouch for, can sometimes become a problem. So those are 2 things to keep in mind if we decide to go with a larger data set based problem such as this one.
So Google just had a Dev Fest, and I watched like just a overview of it, and I think they announced like a better integration of Kaggle and Google Colab. So effectively, they want you to like take your notebooks out of Kaggle, go to Colab, and start using kind of Google models also. I'll try to find details, but I think basically they provide like easy way to go in and out now.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, the only thing which I wish they would do is the data integration too of Google Drive and Kaggle storage, because that's the more challenging one as well. Because you know, if you have to use data stored on Kaggle, you can do it only within Kaggle, and if you can move the data off to Google Drive, but that's when then you need Google Drive storage more than the standard 20 gig that they provide. Of course, they provide it fairly cheaply, but cheap is relative because it's about, you can get about 100 gig for $20 a year. But that is a factor to keep in mind if people who want to compete. If you have an opinion about it, you know, make sure you speak up and say, hey, that won't work or it'll be a problem. But again, as I said, you can work around it by just staying within Kaggle, because then you don't have to download the data, you just attach. And you can generate output, I believe, and Steve or Gautam, if you guys or Yuri, if you submitted, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can generate output data files of up to 5 gig and attach them as inputs further down the road as well from Kaggle. Moving along, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Say there, yeah, like on certain competitions, if it's not a notebook only competition, then if you're on Google Colab, you can use the Kaggle API to like submit directly from Colab and get your score back, which is useful.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Thanks. Yep. Good point. So what Steve is talking about is if you don't have a kernel competition like we saw on the tweet sentiment extraction, then you can use And again, these are things which if people haven't done and would like help on and stuff, we can get into it as and when we encounter or people encounter issues. But to the Steve's point, to emphasize what he said, it's possible if you are not, if it isn't a kernel competition, then you can just download the data to Google Drive, run your Colab notebook there, and use the Kaggle API to just submit and get the score back as well using commands from Kaggle. Good point. You need not even.
You also have the benefit. There's also the benefit, if it's not a kernel-only thing, that means you have internet access from your Kaggle notebook, which means that you can then use like sort of external sources like Jovian or whatever to store the results of your experiments. Whereas if it's a kernel-only competition, you can't have external internet access, and so you can't send results out. So it's harder to monitor how your experiments are doing. So that's another good reason to not have a sort of kernel-only competition.
Yeah, that's yet another, as you can see, Steve has a lot of experience submitting and working with Kaggle in its various forms and things. As Steve said, if it's not kernel competition, then you can have the internet on Jovian, for example, and I think Steve has used it quite a bit, or at least more than most people on the Kaggle group. There are various, so Jovian is something that helps you keep track of the various experiments, which you'll quickly realize as you start playing with various parameters and variable settings and things like that, that it's the same PowerPoint final revision one, final, and then, by the time you get to the third draft of the final revision of your PowerPoint, you don't know which one is the most final of them all, and you run into that kind of a problem with Kaggle submissions as well. So Jovian is something that helps you keep track of it. I think Steve has used it quite a bit, and there are other such platforms that we have also used, or different people on the Kaggle team have used. Steve again has used another such capability called Catalyst, I believe, which is also kind of framework that somewhat like FastAI, but different, that helps you interact and keep track of things and use built-in models and things like that. So you can do all that if it's not a kernel competition, because you can have the internet connection turned on. Okay, the other competition, sorry, I should wait. Can you see Jigsaw multilingual toxic comment or not yet?
Not yet. Oh, see it now.
Good. Getting faster. The Jigsaw multilingual toxic comment, the interesting reason I picked, although I think I myself would be a little hesitant to jump on this one, but interestingly, it was 3 months ago, but also apparently this was one of the early ones that allowed for, or people have used the TPU support that Kaggle provides in this challenge. So that's a reason to kind of at least evaluate and see what we can take away from this competition. And whether it's a good one to participate in. And this one just has to do, again, it's just a submission, so I believe this is not a kernel competition. I don't recall, I think the data for this one was, I don't know whether I've written it down somewhere. Yeah, the Jigsaw one is about 5 gig. The tweet is the best of them with only about 4 megabyte. I think the Google question answering is also quite reasonable at 14 meg. The TensorFlow 2.0 was 16 gig. And then last one that at least I had highlighted, or at least called out, was this gendered pronoun resolution. And you can take a look at it and see what it talks about. It talks about identifying the gender of the pronoun that is used, and using NLP techniques to identify. And this one has a reasonable data size as well for some reason. And the other interesting thing as we learn over time is the evaluation metrics for all these competitions are different, and you'd learn different aspects of loss functions and the evaluation metrics and so on. But this one also is a submission of a CSV file. So I think from what at least these 4 or 5 that I picked out to just kickstart the discussion are all submissions, it looks like, which is good, and barring 1 or 2 of them, the other 2 or 3 are in the megabyte size, so data shouldn't be a problem. Any strong opinions one way or the other of what people are looking to learn from the competition? And the other factor just to keep in mind is even on the images, we started with rather simple classification one before we moved on to segmentation, so people can kind of get over basic hurdles of preparing the notebook, data submission, integration, all of those kinds of challenges, and becoming familiar with using the various pre-trained models that are available and all of these kinds of things. But people may be at a different point in NLP. So with that, I'll go quiet and ask for inputs and suggestions, any thoughts, comments. And by the way, if, as I said in the Slack channel, many people might have just started to look at the details. So if you have other suggestions as well, feel free to send them in. But any comments?
I've posted a different competition in the chat.
Oh, okay, great. Let me look at that and see whether I can.
The Quora question pairs one.
Quora. Is there a link, Gautam,
Yep.
for that?
It's there in the chat. Do you want me to paste it again?
Yes, could you? Because I don't see it for some reason. Maybe my connection. Okay, got it. This time, let me bring it.
Also, your screen has stopped sharing.
Yeah, I did. Since I had to look at the thing for a minute, I'll go back to sharing. Okay. Can you guys see my screen yet?
Not yet.
Still loading.
But today it's really slow. Usually
Yes.
okay, you can see it now. Okay, so this is the one you want to talk to it.
Yeah, it's a really old competition. I think relatively it's 3 years ago, and it's basically I think predicting whether 2 questions on Quora are having the same intent or meaning. So it's I mean, as a task is fairly simple, and the data size is also I think 500 MB, so it's not that big. And most of the activity on this, most of the notebooks are also fairly old, so we would be and it would be more challenging to work on it with the newer techniques that we have. Yeah, with transformers and stuff. I don't think there are too many notebooks on using transformers. Yeah.
That's interesting. See whether with so 3 years they may not have used any of the transformer-oriented stuff and so on, right?
Yep.
That'd be interesting. Just to see what kinds of techniques and what's the way by which they evaluate. Okay, so it's just you must predict whether their intent is the same. Interesting.
Yes.
I see. Interesting.
The only thing I would say about that is yeah, like it's like quite good to sort of come up with your own ideas to start with, and then when you run out of ideas, it's good to like look at the top submissions to see how they got their results. And so, like in a competition that's 3 years old, as Srinivas says, that they probably won't be using transformers and stuff, and so at the end of the competition, it might be hard to sort of get good ideas about how to proceed. Whereas, like in a more modern one, they probably would be using like BERT and things.
Yeah, that's why it's more
Yeah.
challenging, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the pro is that, as Gavin said, you would be using much more modern techniques. The con, I guess, is that once you're done with it, you won't be able to benchmark yourself as to whether you've really used the modern techniques in an optimal way, which in some sense you can do with the more recent. So I guess that's Steve's point, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
there's pros
that,
and cons for every one of them.
yeah, so the other competition that you showed before, the whatever it was, the Google one that was similar to that.
The Google Quest Q&A labeling. Yeah, this one
Yeah.
is a little different. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, like was it a question and answering one, but more recent?
Oh, is there is, you mean the TensorFlow one? This was 8. This was 7. The tweet sentiment one just was 3.
What was your first competition that you put up? Sorry, I can't see.
Oh, you can't see it again?
Can you put your screen up again,
Yeah.
which had the tabs?
Yeah, I thought I was, but for some reason the Zoom connection or Zoom is sharing is not optimal at all today. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, see the second one, Google Quest.
Yes.
Yeah, is that not a
That
sort
one?
of similar? Yeah, is that not a similar type of competition to the one that Gautam's put up?
Gautam's one is, I think maybe, again, surface level. I have not spent time, and which is something that we all should do, looking at them in more detail. But just on the surface, that one seems like it's at least easily explainable, right? It's like I provide 2 questions and the intent the same. So you have to just decide whether the probability of the intent of the questions is the same. So at least from that, I can understand. In this case, I believe, and I'm still trying to read through and understand, I think it is more that you need to answer the question, if I'm not mistaken. Or is it still ranking, but more label ranking?
Right.
So I think, yeah, it is along multiple dimensions that you have to rank the answer, if I understand correctly. But that's kind of what is our task. I think it'd be good to spend a few, maybe even, overall an hour or 2 going through each of them and understanding the task and what we would potentially learn from doing this. It seems like all of them, including even Gautam's one, and I can check that out. If Gautam, have you checked whether that one is still in the sense that some quick submission can be made and you could get the response and stuff?
I've not tried that out yet, but I can do that.
Okay, so maybe even I can try it over the next several days and see whether it still is active and, ranks submission. We can just take a notebook that already some people have and resubmit to see that it does it in reasonable time and all that. And any comments on what people are looking for or what level of challenge they're looking for or anything specific they would like to learn or like to avoid or any other such comments?
Nothing specific, Srinivas. This is Sandeep.
Thanks.
This is my first NLP one, so I'm not sure. But I'll...
Yeah, I mean, it's first NLP one for me too. So there's always a first. Joseph, anybody else have missed on the chat? Yuri, any thoughts, strong opinions on what we should or should stay away from?
I can speak on the.
Go ahead.
So regarding the tweet sentiment span extraction, it's a. I mean, the task is slightly convoluted, right? You are not. I mean, it's not a simple prediction of sentiment or anything like that. You have to extract a span of text, so it's not directly obvious what type of task it is. So people have done that task using Q&A, question answering as a question answering task. Some people have done it as an NER task. I'm not sure how that works out. So maybe it's a slightly complex competition to start with. Yeah. Whereas the Quora question one is a simple one that even anyone can have a basic model, or you can have a complex transformer model to do the same thing. Yeah.
That's a good point. I think. Yeah, I think to a certain extent I tend to lean in the direction of let's get something in the domain under our belt before we begin to be kind of fancier and so yeah, that is definitely an attractive element, Gautam, of what you point out, because it's better to get usage familiarity concept, using models, pre-trained models, blah, 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 and all that, and not get the competition itself overwhelm you, if you will. So that's a point in favor for sure. Anybody else? Joseph, any thoughts?
I like what Gautam said, and I like what you said about that. Start with something that we can easily get our teeth into, and then if it proves to be too simple, then we can finish it and move on to the next one. Otherwise, we deal with the challenges and learn something, and then move on to the next more complicated one.
Yeah.
And I think so. We should start. Maybe a question pairs is a good one to start with, probably.
Who's that? I'm sorry, Miss.
This is Sandeep.
Ah, okay. Anyone else?
I take it as well that if the people in the Kaggle NLP group who are doing the sentiment analysis one, if they can only meet on a Monday, they couldn't join in anyway. So there's not really any sort of great desire or whatever, or reason to do the same one as them.
Yeah, as I said, it's one of the factors, but doesn't have to be the overwhelming, that there's no compelling that we should do the same thing. I mean, I think, yeah, it's one of the factors we should think about, but not the only one. Yeah. And I would, like to, and I'd also like to keep it broader, meaning that, we may not be only focused on NLP, so getting some basic techniques, familiarity, and I would like to continue for this group to support people of all skill levels, even first time trying something, and people who are much more expert at doing stuff, and the whole gamut, if you will. and people who say, we're very good at images and are getting into NLP and vice versa. So with that all said, it looks like, people are, by the way, if I haven't, I don't yet know how quickly to figure out all the names in the chat while I'm screen sharing on Google. What's the best way to do that? Click on Python. Got it. Okay, so anyway, Alvaro, Antonio, Dinesh, Aswant, and I believe Victor and Yuri, and I forget, I know in another call, your username, Tayok, you had mentioned the specific name to Joseph, but I forget what you used. Any of you, please speak up if you have any strong thoughts. If any comments from anybody I named, they've all been quiet.
Sorry,
Victor, I just want the basically auditor not going to participate because they're just a beginner at this point.
Okay. Sorry, Alvaro, you were going to say something?
Oh yes, I agree. Started with this easier one, so we can some of us can get the hang of it.
Okay.
Yeah, start with the easier to accomplish.
Okay. Dinesh, Ashwin, anyone else?
Yeah, I concur. Like I'm the beginner, so easier one is fine. I think simple classification would be good to start with.
Okay, Haswant or KZ, Nidin, sorry.
Yeah, so I am beginner to NLP, so I think question pairing is a good start for me. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with everyone. So we could start with the older competition, the Quora question pair, right? And then move on to new ones.
Good.
But as Steve said, I want to get to know quickly the newer methods, the new techniques, like the transformers and the BERT ones, so we could try to spend less time on the Quora question pairs competition, and then like go for the newer ones with more like things to learn, like the more updated notebooks with more interesting ideas.
Yeah,
but we can discuss we can discuss in the next one after we finish with the Quora question pair competition.
No, even the question pairs, Antonio, to your point, it doesn't. The point only that I think Steve was making was, I mean, there's nothing preventing us from using the modern techniques. In fact, the interesting thing would be, because all those notebooks aren't using it, it would be for us to kind of grab the ideas and implement them. The point Steve was making more was that you can't benchmark after you're done as to whether you have reached the state of the art with respect to those techniques. So I still think we'll be able to, right? Because, and in fact, you can view it as both a plus and a minus. The minus is what Steve pointed out. The plus is that nobody has already applied the techniques to that. So we ought to be able to score much better than what the scores were 3 years back. And we can see whether, with older techniques, people are still beating the newer techniques. Then that ought to raise some interesting questions about the newer techniques too.
Yeah, this is a very, very good plus.
Yeah. So with that, I think what we are leaning towards is definitely the Quora question pairs. The one thing, and this is the reason I said that we take a week or two, what I would suggest to everyone, and in fact, Gautam, if you can do that as well, Steve and I will give it a shot, or anybody else, is try and make a submission since it's that old, maybe the old notebooks don't work, but if you can even make a submission, see whether you get it back, are able to quickly get something in response, and that we don't run into problems of data being too dated or evaluation not working or any of that kind of problems, then we would be inclined to choose that particular competition, is the way I would phrase it. Any other thoughts or comments from anyone else? Is everybody okay with that summarization?
Yes, Srinivas. I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
by the way,
post.
I tried copying one of the popular notebooks, and it had the score, and at least it didn't run right away. But I think it failed on like data unzipping, so it might be like a small problem. But.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, these are the typical things we have to do before we bottom out and on deciding. So thanks, Yuri, for that. And over the next several days, let's try it out and make sure that we can get a submission evaluation, the data is fine, and that we don't run into any other problems. But if not, then maybe that's a good one, the Quora question pairs that Gautam suggested, to get to be the next competition that we focus on. And as many people have said, if we can successfully navigate that one with the new techniques, then that'd be great. We can then move on to another one, but let's sink our teeth into that one first. And let's use the next week to just kind of flush out the pipe on that one and make sure that that's the one that everybody is comfortable jumping into as the next choice. Okay, thanks Gautam for the suggestion, and thanks to everybody for